Good evening. It's Friday, the 24th of October. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. There was sporadic Palestinian violence in the capital today, although less than feared, as greater numbers of security personnel deployed in and around the Old City, braced against further clashes after a week of unrest and a terror attack. Access to Muslim Friday prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound was limited to men over the age of 40, and no restrictions were placed on female worshippers. Some 6,000 in total attended the prayers, while those barred from entering the compound held services outside in the streets of East Jerusalem under the watchful eye of police. After the conclusion of prayers, Palestinians in the Wadi Joz and Isawiya neighborhoods hurled stones and firecrackers at police, who dispersed them with stun grenades and detained at least 3 people. The tensions followed the vehicular Palestinian terror attack on Wednesday that killed a 3-month-old Jewish baby and injured 8 people. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the reinforcements to be brought to the city, including additional units of border police. Last night, a few dozen far right-wing Jewish activists demonstrated at the site of the attack, where they accused the government of responsibility because of its weak response against terror. Israel is calling on the United Nations Security Council to condemn Wednesday's terror attack and denounce the rise in Palestinian incitement. A letter sent by Ambassador to the UN, Ron Prosor, pointed out that earlier in the week, Israel warned the Council that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas had been advancing violence against Jews and that the attack in Jerusalem was the result of his inflammatory remarks. Prosor went on to tell the Council that Abbas' senior advisor, Sultan Abu al-Ain, hailed the perpetrator as a heroic martyr. Prosor writing that it should come as no surprise that the Palestinian president hasn't uttered a single word of condemnation about the heinous attack because he's too busy leading his campaign to erase the connection between the Jewish people and Jerusalem while inciting violence. Prime Minister Netanyahu also lashed out against the Palestinian leader, saying that this is the same Abbas who just days ago called for harming Jews in Jerusalem. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki responded to queries from the media as to whether Washington believes Abbas' recent comments have encouraged Palestinians to participate in violence against Jews.
We obviously believe that the act last night warrants condemnation, evidenced by the statement we released last night. I'm not going to characterize the comments made or not made by Prime Minister Netanyahu or the response from President Abbas.
Well, if you haven't really received a condemnation from President Abbas, then don't you think he should get offer one?
I think our view of it is clear, evidenced by our statement last night. I would point you to him on any comments that they would like to make.
But what about his comments like over the past? I mean, there's just been several comments that people have remarked about that seem to be incurring incitement. Is that not concerned?
I don't think that's, as you know, President Abbas has renounced violence and consistently sought a diplomatic and peaceful solution that allows for 2 states. I don't have any other analysis for you to offer.
Another tragedy in Nepal has claimed the lives of 2 Israeli citizens. At least 11 people, including 2 Israeli women, were killed when a tour bus overturned and careened some 200 meters into a ravine. The vehicle was en route to the Langtang National Park from Kathmandu at the time of the accident and was reportedly overloaded by up to 100 passengers, many of whom were clinging on the roof. At least 52 others were injured, including 4 Israelis, who are all described as suffering light to moderate wounds. Another Israeli man who was declared missing after the crash has been located at a Nepalese hospital. The latest incident in the popular tourist destination comes just 10 days after 4 Israeli mountain climbers were killed during a snowstorm disaster in a South Asian nation that claimed the lives of at least 43. History was made in Jerusalem's Old City this morning when Women of the Wall read from a Torah scroll at the Western Wall for the first time. During the Rosh Chodesh service to mark the start of the Jewish month, the group's members took out a tiny scroll that they smuggled past guards into the compound in one of the members' prayer shawl bags for the reading of a bat mitzvah. In a precedent-setting verdict, the Jerusalem District Court ruled last year that women are allowed to read from the Torah at the Western Wall, although current regulations limit worshippers to reading only the holy books provided at the site, which are available on the men's side of the compound. Western Wall Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovitz today accused the group of perpetuating a deception and vowed that every effort will be undertaken in the future to prevent repetition of the incident. Turning to coalition woes, Mbaita UD MK and Knesset faction chairwoman Ayelet Shaked is threatening that her faction will quit and topple the government if the conversion reform bill submitted by Tnua MK Elazar Stern is voted out of committee. A hearing of the Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee has been set for Monday, the first day of the Knesset's winter session. The bill was removed from the cabinet agenda this week by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who explained to coalition faction leaders that he's not willing to push it through. Several legislators from both Yesh Atid and Hatnua are now calling for their parties to leave the coalition if the conversion bill is not passed. The faction heads in Netanyahu's governing coalition decided on Wednesday to settle their differences in a new committee tasked with bridging the gaps with representatives from each party. Joining me now in the studio to discuss the latest political events is senior correspondent for Bloomberg, Israel Kalev Ben-David. Hi, Kalev. Thanks for coming in, as always.
Pleasure to be here, Aaron.
Now, we had statements from the mayor and the commissioner of the police earlier this week, reassuring the public that calm will be restored to the city. And this, of course, was the morning that there was a terror attack later at night on Wednesday. So now they're making the same reassuring statements. But what can be done to restore calm to this city?
Well, look, first of all, I think it's an issue that's going to take not just one solution, but several approaches to a solution. The immediate one is the one that was taken belatedly after that terror attack and this latest round of violence in East Jerusalem, which is boosting forces, police forces and border police forces in East Jerusalem neighborhoods where the violence has been occurring, setting up new permanent outposts, police outposts in these areas, so there's a permanent police presence. They're talking about deploying these observation balloons of the type we usually only have been seeing on Friday at the Muslim prayers over the Temple Mount, having them semi-permanently over some of these Arab neighborhoods. So these are some of the security measures. The other are going to be more longer-term solutions. They're going to have to address some of the issues of the Arab residents in these neighborhoods, inequality issues. They're going to have to try to work out some way to control the Jewish activists that are moving into these areas. In some cases, I mean, both the Prime Minister and Mayor Barkat have defended them, saying that these are legal purchases.
Like in Silwan.
In Silwan.
Yeah.
Some question, though, are they being raised through middlemen? But when you have a situation where you have these apartments, people moving in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden Arab residents in these neighborhoods suddenly see Jewish residents overnight taking control of apartments, that means large trouble in the neighborhood. So it's going to have to be a combination of the factors. We've seen flare-ups like this before, and we know this has happened because of the Gaza war and, of course, the killing of the Palestinian teenager in revenge for the killing of the 3 Israeli teenagers.
Right.
So it's going to probably simmer on for a while, but I suspect that it will simmer down eventually.
Now, so far, things have been relatively quiet in the West Bank.
Right.
Do you expect that that will continue?
I do, and there was a report, security officials talking anonymously in the paper saying they don't see this broadening into a third intifada. You got to keep in mind, Jerusalem is a unique situation. Jews and Arabs really living right next to each other. If Arab residents want to make trouble, if they want to vandalize Jewish property or attack Jewish vehicles, they really just have to step out their door to do it. In the West Bank, it's different. The communities live separately. You have army patrolling the roads, throwing stones and rocks at vehicles in the West Bank is more likely to bring back a violent reaction either from armed soldiers or from the armed settlers, residents of Judea and Samaria. So it's a different situation there and different factors. So if we haven't seen it yet, after what's been going on in Jerusalem for the last 3 months, I don't anticipate it. But of course, anything could happen, as we know. I mean, there could be a situation, another incident in Jerusalem or elsewhere that could always set something off. But short of that, I don't think so.
Now, Washington continues to reject unilateral moves from either the Israelis or the Palestinians in an effort to bring everyone back for a negotiated agreement. And that would seem inconceivable at this time, although, interestingly, right before I came on tonight, I was talking to a very prominent Palestinian journalist who thinks that that's imminent. Where do you stand?
Well, look, it's interesting because after the collapse of the peace talks in last April, May, you remember the U.S. said they were going to take a time out on the peace process. But in fact, in the last few weeks and months, we've heard different tone coming, especially from Secretary of State Kerry, who's more than once said the status quo is not sustainable. So we're hearing a different tune. Why? Could be because of the U.S. is trying to build this Arab-Muslim coalition against Islamic State, ISIS, in Iraq and Syria, and so they want to bring these Muslim states together and get support from them. And Secretary Kerry said he's been hearing from those leaders that they want to see some movement on the Palestinian front. So we're looking back now, you know, do I think it's imminent in the sense of going to be some big breakthrough announcement talks? No, it really doesn't appear. But it does appear the U.S. is going to continue to try to make an effort in those directions, despite the almost humiliating failure of the talks last April.
Well said. All right, we have time for one quick domestic political question, and that is the Prime Minister's backtracking on this controversial conversion bill by Hatnua. Now we have Naftali Bennett of Abay Tayyudi making a series of threats. He's always been a very firm ideologue, but what is behind that, and how serious of a coalition crisis do you think that we're facing?
What's behind those threats is the fact that if you look at the polls, the only party in the coalition that seems to would gain, and if elections were held now, would be his party, the Jewish Home Party. So he's obviously talking about from the position of strength. A lot of chatter this week about new elections. All the journalists are writing about that, including myself. But the fact is, I don't think so. I think, in fact, this government is probably going to at least last another Knesset session. One of the most contentious issues, the budget, has been basically agreed on between the main parties in the government. So certainly that looks like it'll pass. I think it's too soon. A lot of posturing, because different parties want to achieve different things. For example, the conversion bill that some of the parties want to push forward despite opposition or indifference from Prime Minister Netanyahu. But I think I don't think we're really in the election season. I would say get back to me in a year, Aaron, and then we really could be talking about early elections.
Well, we're going to get back to you a lot sooner than that.
I'm sure you will.
Thanks so much again, Kalev. Have a great weekend.
Shabbat Shalom, Aaron, to you and to all the viewers.
In other news, at least 10 Egyptian soldiers were killed in the Sinai Peninsula today by a car bomb that targeted 2 armored vehicles stopped at a checkpoint. Security sources say that at least 27 additional troops were injured in the attack near El Arish, close to the border with the Gaza Strip. A new poll has been released revealing that more than 85% of Jewish citizens support banning controversial Balad MK Hanin Zoabi from the Knesset. The Israel Hayom newspaper commissioned the New Wave Research Institute to conduct the survey, which also found that just 11% agree with Zoabi's claims that her remarks are protected by the right to free speech. Zoabi sparked outrage earlier this week by saying that IDF soldiers are worse terrorists than ISIS because Islamic State members only kill one person at a time, while the IDF kills dozens of Palestinians with one button. The Muslim legislator participated in the 2010 Gaza flotilla, and her parliamentary immunity was removed this past July after she said that the murderers of 3 Israeli teenagers in June should not be considered terrorists. IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked several MKs for their reactions to plans by Israel Beteinu's Robert Ilatov to introduce legislation to strip Zoabi of her Israeli citizenship.
I think Zoabi, she's it's very strange that like these women, they could stay even one day in the parliament. We have to be ashamed. It's not her fault, it's our fault. We have to make a law that like this kind of women, she's talking against Am Israel. She has to be out. She could stay in Palestine, and we give her our blessing to stay there.
I personally am certainly embarrassed and ashamed to work in the same building with her. There's certainly a place for a wide range of opinions and ideologies. There's no place for lies. There's no place for incitement.
Would you favor revoking her credential?
There are laws and rules, and those have to be explored, but I certainly believe that there should be no place in the Knesset for a person who speaks the way she speaks.
Thousands of revelers partied at an overnight 12-hour rave from sunset to sunrise at the Dead Sea as they experienced a multimedia soiree at the lowest point on Earth. Several international singers, accompanied by local DJs, performed on a huge stage equipped with advanced audio-visual technology at the event that was named the Dead Sea Rave 424, which is the number of meters that the location lies below sea level. The sensational music kept the crowd up dancing throughout the night under the starry skies and the breathtaking desert backdrop of Masada on the shores of the sea. Several tourists who attended the party raved about the rave.
We got the chance to party at the lowest point in the world and dance to the morning hours and see the sunrise in the desert. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing. I always wanted to, go 424 meters underground and party. Really, really cool. I'm definitely going to come back next year if you have another party next year.
I thought it was really, really fun, really well made. A lot of cool effects, good people, good vibes, and obviously good DJs, so it was awesome. Definitely coming back next year. Had a great time.
The success of a project launched by South African Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein last year, known as Keeping It Together, in encouraging observance of the Sabbath, led the rabbi to expand the initiative internationally. And this Shabbat, the Jewish communities of 350 cities and 35 nations are participating. Earlier this week in Tel Aviv, the rabbi explained the significance of the project to Aretz Sheva.
There's been an amazing people's movement that has been that's really sprung up all around the world. From really, we just started talking about the project in earnest about 7-8 months ago when we released the first major video about it, and since then we've got groups working in more than 350 cities in 35 countries around the world. It's quite astonishing what has happened, and the beauty is that these communities are all taking responsibility and driving it and owning the project. And obviously, from the center we're providing educational material and marketing material, which has been translated into 8 languages, in English and Hebrew and French and Spanish, Portuguese, German, Italian, Russian. And when you think about what 350 cities actually means, we're talking about everywhere, right across South America, Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo and Rio and Mexico City and Panama City, across the United States, almost 100 cities. Talking about the usual places, like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and Miami, and then Mountain Back, Alabama, Ben Salem, Pennsylvania.
What do you find that draws people to actually come and find interest in keeping the Shabbat and observing the Shabbat? What intrigues people?
I think that there are 2 driving forces behind this, because you put your finger on it. It's really the fact that this project has a natural energy. So often when working in projects in a community space, it's a big effort and it's a slog, and you're begging people and you're asking them to join. Here it's the reverse. People have been flooding in. They desperately want to be part of it. There's a natural energy. So where does that natural energy come from? I think two places to answer your question. One is from the deep desire that there is for Jewish unity. I think for people it is very special, this notion that Am Yisrael is coming together in unity. I mean, I was here in Israel with my family a few months ago during the war. We heard the azakot, the sirens, and experienced a little bit of what Israel went through, but also felt the tremendous unity here in the country and tremendous international Jewish unity. But that was a unity which was forced from the outside. It was a unity that was imposed upon us by the hatred of others and by force of circumstance. What the Shabbat Project provides is an opportunity for Jews to unify out of choice, out of love, out of ideals, out of who we are, and I think that's very meaningful to people. So I think that's the one driving force. The other is the power of Shabbat as a mitzvah for today's times. That in modern life there is so much pressure, which is actually leads to the dislocation of life through technology and all kinds of other financial and the sheer pace of modern life, that leads to the fragmentation of community, of family, even of the individual psyche. And Shabbat comes in with a force of unity. So when we're talking about the slogan, keeping it together, it's on multiple levels. It's keeping it together as Am Yisrael, as a Jewish people all around the world, but it's also keeping the family together, keeping the individual together. Shabbos has this force of unity that it brings to the human psyche.
Do you find that it's harder in Israel to tell people, come on, keep it together.
You know what? I've heard that conventional wisdom time and time again. People all said, no, it's not going to work in Israel. People won't be interested. There's going to be opposition to it. There's going to be cynicism. And I can tell you, I have not found that. I think that the conventional wisdom about Israel is 100% dead wrong. I sense here a spirit in this country where there's a real thirst for Jewish unity and a real thirst for Jewish values and a thirst for Shabbat.
Turning to sports, and Maccabi Tel Aviv suffered its first loss of the EuroLeague season, falling to CSKA Moscow in Russia, 99-80 last night. The defeat drops Maccabi's record to 1-1 and was similar to an early season loss to the same club last year. Following that humbling defeat, Maccabi regrouped, defeating CSKA in the Final Four, going on to become EuroLeague champions. Last night, Brian Randall led Maccabi with 18 points and 6 rebounds. Tel Aviv played well in the first half and was behind by only 7 points before falling apart after the intermission. In local finance, the shekel today lost strength against all major foreign currencies, and due to the closure of the stock market on Fridays, here's a look at the closing numbers for the week. The IBA weather team says that we can expect fair conditions and another slight rise in temperatures tomorrow. Here's the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope to see you again tomorrow at our Saturday time of 6 p.m. when I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a good evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.